Hi, I'm Doug. Welcome back to Doug Stuff, where I talk about all these various things that I've collected through the years. Today, I want to talk about something a little bit different. Everybody talks about Prince in the 80s, and he was fantastic in the 80s. I don't think anybody's taking away from that. But not a lot of people talk about Prince in the 90s, and they forget that he actually had some massive, massive hits in the 90s, and he had some of his most interesting career twists and turns throughout the 90s. Yes, there was the whole fight with Warner Brothers and the name change, and you can find out about that in absolutely thousands of videos or reports and stuff about that. That's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to talk about the music. Starting with the album that made me a Prince fan. So in 1989, I got my first Prince album, which was Batman. I was certainly aware of who Prince was, but it was Batman that got me to get me to go and buy one of his albums because I really wasn't a fan, and then I really liked Batman, so I got interested enough that I picked up his 1990 release, Graffiti Bridge, and I got it because I remember Thieves in the Temple was a big hit, and I really liked it, and I was really into Guns N' Roses and things like that, Metallica and stuff at the time, so I didn't know a lot about funk or soul or R&B or anything like that, and Thieves in the Temple just sounded completely new and different, and Graffiti Bridge was also a movie. I hate to discuss it. It's a really, really terrible movie. You should never ever watch it. Don't ever do that to yourself. But the soundtrack is really interesting, and for a long time, this was one of my absolute favorites. It's been several decades. I've lived with it since basically the day it came out in 1990, and I don't know if I would still put it among my absolute favorites, but it is really good. Some of the highlights on this one are the New Power Generation, Weekend Funk, Joy and Repetition, which is a huge fan favorite, and you actually owe it to yourself to check out Joy and Repetition if you have even a passing interest in Prince. Joy and Repetition is really good, and there's also a really good live version of that in the 2000s that he did, but we're talking about the 90s. And then of course Thieves in the Temple. And there's also some stuff from the time on here. I always really liked Release It. It's always one of my favorites. So the first one out of the gate for the 90s was Graffiti Bridge. The next one up, one of his most famous albums and the one that pretty much sealed the deal for me, Diamonds and Pearls. Diamonds and Pearls has Get Off, it has Cream, it had Diamonds and Pearls, obviously, and it had Money Don't Matter Tonight. All of them were hits. The first three of those were massive hits. Money Don't Matter Tonight was, I think, more of a minor hit. But Cream was number one. Get Off was certainly in the top 10, maybe even the top 5. Get Off played a lot. And Diamonds and Pearls played all the time, so that was somewhere in the top 5, too. The thing with this album is that as great as it is, it's very top heavy. So for example, on vinyl, it's 2 LPs. The first LP is fire. The second LP it's okay. It's got some good songs towards the end, with Live for Love and Insatiable. But really, the fire is the first half of this album. First half is absolutely incredible. And some of the best songs I think of his whole career. Get Off is actually my favorite Prince song. So next one up was the Symbol album. Symbol album. This was actually not when he was the Symbol. This was when he was Prince. In fact, you know it because the opening track is called My Name is Prince. That was a very minor hit. Really, the big hit from this one was Seven. But also Sexy MF played a lot. Sexy MF played a lot. So I don't know how it charted, but everybody knew about it. I remember when it came out, everybody knew about Sexy MF. It was in the clubs and things like that. And I was a young college kid at the time, so I definitely remember them playing it. And, but some of the big standout tracks for fans are The Morning Papers is really good, and Love to the Nines. This is a really strong album. It's a little patchier than I would like. There's a few songs that I can live without. He really got into the whole hip-hop thing with this one and Diamonds and Pearls, and it worked for most of Diamonds and Pearls. There was one bad song in Diamonds and Pearls called Jughead, but this one has a couple of bad songs. Just because nobody in the history of the world ever said, I want to listen to Prince for the hip hop. That's not what they came to Prince for, and he was really struggling with that whole time period. But if this is a struggle, it's a really good struggle, so it's certainly worth checking out. Then you get to the hits and the B-sides. I'm not going to get into those there. It's just a collection of the hits and the B-sides. Then you have Come. This was an album that I remember I bought it the day it came out, and I was just devastated. This was the first time I ever bought an album by any artist where I felt genuinely ripped off. I felt like you could tell he was just, he was trying to get out of his contract. He had, as I didn't want to discuss, he had the whole fight with Warner Brothers, and he wanted out of his contract, and so he just gave him this. It even says his birth and then a supposed death, 1993. Like, this is supposed to be the end of Prince. Because he's the name change. And he actually released The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, which, where is that? I have that somewhere here. So that was actually released in 1994. This was a massive hit. This was one of the biggest hits of his career. And it was also the last big hit of his career. And he did it outside of Warner Brothers. They let him release one single. He released this one and it became massive. So then they really held on tight to him after that. But he wanted out. So he did, and they wanted that song. He didn't give them that. He gave them Come. And I will say a couple of things about this with decades of retrospective. It's actually not a bad album. It's got a really interesting flow and vibe. It's got a really dark, murky kind of soul music that is really different for Prince. This also feels very personal. It reminds me in some ways of 1980s Dirty Mind, just not nearly as good as Dirty Mind, but it's got that same kind of like dark vulnerability to it. So this is a tough one to comment about. I can't. And also another thing to mention is the recording on this. Whoever recorded this just did an incredible job. I remember that even on CD, the CD was absolutely incredible on this. The sound quality is fantastic on this, fantastic on vinyl. It's got a really great sound to it. Then next we get up to my all-time favorite album by Prince or by anybody ever, The Gold Experience. The Gold Experience, this album is fire. I remember getting it the night it came out. I love this album. I knew all the songs beforehand because they had been bootleg, because he finished this album like a year before. He originally wanted them to release these two albums at the same time, on the same day. And Warner Brothers was like, why would we compete against ourselves? So instead, he gave him the crappy one, and then we had to wait a year for the good one. That's a little harsh, because there is some good stuff on Come, and it's certainly aged extremely well. In fact, the irony is that in many ways, this probably aged better than, well, more than half of his other stuff from the 90s, because it has this timeless kind of like R&B kind of dark vibe with the horns, and it's got some funk to it and some groove. So it's actually aged really well. But getting on to the really great stuff, The Gold Experience is absolutely fantastic. The only track on here that I'm not a big fan of is the opening one. I know. The P Control, Pussy Control never did it for me. It was a club hit. It was in the clubs a lot. But I never thought I should have put it at the very beginning of this album. But the rest of this album is incredible. The last 5 songs on here, 319, Shy, Billy Jack Bitch, and I Hate You, and then Gold. Perfect run. Just perfect run. And even before then, you've got great songs like The Most Beautiful Girl in the World. He finally did agree to put that on an album. Shh, which is incredible. Shh is one of his best soul jams. Endorphin Machine, killer rock song, opens up. That's the second song on the album. There's a lot of great music on here. I would definitely I would say this is like the Sign of the Times of the 90s. Like, this has got that kind of wide scope of incredible styles. And if you don't like one song, just cut to the next one, because it'll be a completely different kind of style. Well, then we get into the more patchy stuff. So then, to get out of his contract, he gave us Chaos and Disorder. It's a rock guitar album for the first half. The second half is just nothing but filler, basically, to the point where I listen only to side A. Side B does have Dig You Better Dead, which I kind of like. It's kind of it's a fun little funk kind of song. The rest of the entire side B I can completely live without. But side A's got some good stuff. This has the musicians from The Gold Experience. And they were, I think, the best band he ever had at that time, that time period. So despite the fact that some of this music is good to mediocre, the musicianship really does help it. And the side A, if you like rock and that kind of thing, like hard rock guitar stuff, and you like that from Prince, side A is certainly worth checking out on this. Chaos and Disorder. Oh, and then we come to the beast. 6 LPs. This was originally a 3 CD set. Emancipation. Emancipation's a really good but not great album, and that's a sad thing to say when it's 3 hours long with 36 tracks. Of the 36 songs, I mean, I certainly enjoy more than half of them, and there's certainly 12 like really, really good songs on here, but there's nothing on here that if this album disappeared and never reappeared and wasn't part of his catalog, no one would have missed anything. I like the opening track, Jam of the Year. In fact, it's my favorite song on the album. That's another problem. It's a 36-song album, and the first track is my favorite. It's like 35 more to go. Some people really like this. I was there from the moment it came out. It came out November 19th, 1996. I got it November 18th, the night of. They released a couple hours earlier or whatever. I think I got it like 11 p.m. or something, 9 p.m. or something like that at Tower Records in Chicago or outside Chicago somewhere. And so I've known about it since I've known this album backwards and front since the moment it came out, and it's okay. The problem isn't the singing, it's not the songwriting, it's the production. And I can't believe I'm saying that about a Prince album, but the production is just mid-90s, just not what you expect from Prince at all. It's dull. Can you imagine dull production from Prince? Love him or hate him, nobody ever said he was dull. Then we get into some interesting stuff. So the last group of albums. So the next up was, what do we have? Crystal Ball. This is not actually released on vinyl. This is a bootleg that somebody put onto vinyl and did God's work, because for some reason the estate never released it onto vinyl, so thank God for these people who did. It still sounds pretty good too. This was a 3 LP set of outtakes, mostly focusing around the 96 era and the 93 to 94 era. So basically the Parade era and the Gold Experience era. And since those are two of my favorite eras, I really like this. The problem is that out of 30 songs, I love 18. The rest are just okay. Then you get to The Truth. This is an acoustic album. It's okay. It's a nice cup holder. You get to New Power Soul. Fun. Come On, The One, funky music. The last 3 tracks I really like. The rest are okay. The Vault. I'm trying to wrap this up. The Vault, released in 1999. A jazzy album that was meant to be a throwaway, but I gotta admit this one aged really well. So if you have a record player and you're interested in Prince, this is actually a really good pickup. It sounds great on vinyl. And then finally we have Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic. There's a few good songs on here. This was one of his only real big swings and misses. This was the only time I can think of where he really tried to make a pop album and failed. It just didn't work. It didn't sound like what people wanted from Prince. He would do that a few years later on Musicology, which was his big comeback. But that is a story from another day, that's in the 2000s. So that wraps up the 90s albums from Prince. If you want to know my top 3 from the 90s, it's the Symbol album, it's Diamonds and Pearls, and number 1 is the Gold Experience. Bye, guys.